I want you to think about last week. Were you busy? Probably yes. Most people watching this are busy. You have a full calendar, you're answering messages, showing up, putting in the hours, you're doing things all day long. But tell me this, how much money did you make last week specifically because of the work that you did last week? Not residual revenue, not a payment that came in from something you sold 3 months ago. What did you actively do last week that will directly result in revenue? If you hesitated, this video is for you because here's the dangerous part. Busy really gets rewarded socially. People compliment busy, they admire busy, they normalize burnout so aggressively that if you're constantly overwhelmed, people assume you must be important. Especially as women in business, there's this pressure to always be proving effort, always proving you care, always proving you are trying hard enough. So we fill up our calendar. We spend 6 hours tweaking something that should have taken 1 hour. Because the idea is if we're exhausted at the end of the day, at least we can say that we worked hard. But businesses don't pay for effort, they pay for outcomes. That distinction changes everything. And that distinction really changed everything for me. So let me tell you about it from personal experience. If you're new here, my name is Marian. I left corporate in 2020 after 15 years in sales and consulting. I had the title, I had the income, I had the resume that was supposed to mean that I had totally made it. But I walked away to build something of my own. Since then, I have built multiple brands from the ground up. I run a luxury portrait studio. I consult business owners on sales, positioning, visibility, and systems. And I spend a lot of time around women who are talented, intelligent, and capable, but also completely exhausted. And it's not because they're lazy, and it's not because they're not trying. It's because they're spending massive amounts of energy on things that are feel productive, but are not actually producing results. And I know this because I have done it too. Guilty as charged. I remember hitting a point where I realized I could spend an entire day technically working and still avoid anything that actually required courage. I could redesign something, research something, learn something, map something out, but sending that offer, following up, making that ask, being visible enough to be rejected, that was the part that I kept postponing. And most people don't realize this. Procrastination in business is rarely looking like it's laziness. It usually looks like responsibility. And that's why it's really hard to catch. You can convince yourself that you are building something while completely avoiding the things that actually grow it. When I finally realized that, it changed how I worked entirely. And it also changed how I measure success. Because now I care less about how full my calendar looks and more about whether my actions are connected to actual movement. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So here's the thing about busy. Busy feels like progress and has the texture of productivity. You end the day tired, and tired feels like evidence that something meaningful happened. But that is not a business metric. The real question is not how much did I do? The real question is, did I move my business forward? And I want to be totally clear, not everything in business directly creates revenue. You do need content, you need systems, you need planning, you need time to clear your brain and think strategically. That's all real work. But there is a version of all those things that becomes hiding. And this is how it really looks for most women that I work with. Content creation never gets posted. Research that you're doing, but it never makes a decision. It never turns into a decision. Planning, but never executing. And then constant tweaking instead of actually finding visibility. I remember one season where I was spending hours editing content, organizing workflows, researching strategies, listening to podcasts, taking notes. And meanwhile, I was barely making offers. And I looked and sounded really productive. I even convinced myself that I was building something important. But if you looked at the actual scoreboard, the business was totally slowing down. It was because I was feeding the machine around the business instead of feeding the business itself. And I see this everywhere now. People obsess over logos before sales, websites before conversations, brand clarity before visibility. You don't need to build confidence by preparing forever. You really build it by participating. And the true cost of confusing busy with productivity is not just time. It's the clients you never signed, the opportunities you never followed up on, the revenue that never came about because the business stayed trapped in preparation mode. And honestly, that's truly exhausting because you're working hard without momentum, and that leads to a very specific type of burnout. It's the kind where you're constantly moving and quietly wondering why nothing feels different. So, what does a revenue generating week actually look like? And honestly, it's a lot simpler than people think. So, this is what it looks like. It has three things in it. First, you made or moved an offer. You posted something, sent something, started a conversation, invited someone to work with you. You didn't just add value, it wasn't just education endlessly. You were asking for a decision. Number two, you followed up with someone who expressed interest, a past lead, a previous client, someone who said they wanted to book later. Revenue lives in the follow up, and it does this way more than people think because most businesses are not dying because the offer is terrible. They're dying because nobody followed up consistently enough. Third, you protected time for the work that pays you, not the work that feels productive. That work actually creates movement. So, sales conversations, client delivery, visibility, offers, networking, strategic communication, that is the work. But notice what's not required here. You don't need 12 different software platforms. You don't need a perfect, highly optimized morning routine. You don't need a color coordinated productivity system. Some of the highest revenue weeks I've ever had looked incredibly simple from the outside. A couple strategic conversations, constant visibility, fast follow up, key, clear offers, quick decisions. And here's another thing people misunderstand. Simple doesn't mean small. Simple scales better than chaos ever will. I preach it all the time. Be consistent, be clear, and just be simple. So when I audit my week, and I do this really regularly, I sort everything into three categories. Category one is revenue work. This is anything directly tied to making money. So conversations, sales conversations, offers, follow-ups, client work, referrals, networking, closing. That's the work that keeps the business alive. Then category two is the infrastructure work. Content, systems, planning, education, admin, branding, all those things that fit into that sort of bucket. That work supports revenue work, but it does not replace it. And that category becomes dangerous because it feels legitimate. Nobody questions you when you're saying like, oh, I'm working my website or I'm building systems or I'm planning content. I'm refining my brand. All that sounds really smart and productive. But there comes a point when that preparation only becomes avoidance. And if you're honest, you already know when you cross that line. So keep it in mind and don't hide yourself in the busy work that doesn't lead to actual sales. Then there's category three, straight up busy work. Inbox maintenance that never changes anything, meetings that should have been emailed, one of my pet peeves, reorganizing. I've been guilty of that too. Instead of actually getting things done and executing, consuming information instead of implementing what you already know. Let's be honest, it's probably already in your brain. You just got to go do it. The pattern I see constantly is people who are exhausted and not growing, and they're usually spending their time in categories 2 and 3. So they're working really hard. They're just not prioritizing the work that grows the business. So I want to walk you through a quick audit. So you don't need a spreadsheet and you just got to think through this. You just need to be honest with yourself. That's the biggest thing. So think about last week. I want you to write down everything you actually spent time on. Not what you plan to do or anything like that, what you actually did. And I want you to mark each item. R for revenue, I for infrastructure, and then B for busy work. 1, 2, 3. Look at your R column. How many things are in there? How many hours actually went towards revenue generating activity? Because if that number is low, that's probably your answer. And that's probably why the business feels stalled. Now, I want you to imagine two business owners. The first spends 40 hours researching trends, editing videos, rewriting captions, watching webinars, updating branding, organizing files. And then the second spends 15 hours posting offers, following up, getting on calls, asking for referrals, closing clients. The first person feels more productive, but the second person probably made more money. And that's a big difference. Do you want to just feel productive or do you want to make more money? A lot of people are accidentally optimizing the feeling of productivity instead of the outcome of productivity. My goal for you is not to eliminate infrastructure work. You need infrastructure and systems. My goal for you and for every business owner is to make sure revenue work is protected first because everything else takes your best energy. So here's what I want you to do after this video. First, cut one thing that's pure busy work. So think of one reoccurring task you do mostly out of habit. And I bet you already know what it is. 2, I want you to protect 2 or 3 hours this week specifically for revenue work. So I want you to put it on your calendar like it matters, because it does, but lock it off and protect it. And then 3, I want you to start one thing that you've been avoiding because it feels too direct. So it might be a little bit scary. Send a follow-up, post an offer, start the conversation, ask for the sale. You got to get it into your mind, and I've had to do it too. Direct is not desperate. It's business. And honestly, you probably don't need more time first. You need more honesty first, because most people already have enough time to do the things that matter. They just spend their best energy avoiding the parts of the business that feel exposed. Selling feels exposed. Visibility feels exposed. Following up feels super exposed. But the busy work protects your ego, because nothing in busy work can reject you. But a sales conversation can reject you. And that's why people stay hidden in preparation mode for years. This is scary, but this is what's going to make you money. And this is where the big shift is going to occur. At some point, growing a business requires your identity to shift. You have to stop seeing yourself as someone who's working on a business and start acting like someone responsible for generating revenue. Those are 2 different people. One prioritizes activity and the other prioritizes outcomes. One stays in motion constantly. The other asks, does this actually move the business forward? And if you think about how you're moving the business forward, that alone can change an entire year. Because real business ownership is not about being busy all the time. It's about making decisions consistently, having hard conversations consistently, showing up consistently, making offers consistently. And that's what's creating momentum in your business. Not constant activity and burnout and overwhelm. Consistency in the right places. So, if this conversation hit home for you and you want help identifying what your actual revenue generating activities should be and building visibility around the right things instead of just doing more busy work, I have a resource called Seen and Ready. It's $97. It walks through the framework I use with all my clients to help them clarify how they want to show up, what needs to be visible, and actually what drives momentum. It's linked below. And if you already have visibility, but your sales conversations are stalling before people commit, that's exactly why I created Close It. And that program is focused on handling objections, handling hesitation, making sure people are uncertain, and helping people move towards a decision with confidence. It's also linked below. So take a look at both those things and remember that you are not failing because you're not working hard enough. You're probably working too hard on the wrong things. And if this video made you feel uncomfortable, that's good, because most people don't need another productivity hack. They just need to take an honest look at where your time is actually going. Busy is so seductive because it lets you feel accomplished without risking failure. And eventually you have to decide, do you want to feel productive or do you want to build something real? And they're not always the same things. I have a new video dropping every week. If this was useful, I would love for you to subscribe or send it to someone who needs to hear it. Everything I mentioned is linked down below, and I will see you next week.